we have it.
I sort of think the income's the last thing we talk about. We should talk about the expenses and how we build up to it.
Understood.
Then we go-
But the surplus is part of that expense problem, right? So we can certainly go to what we, and we certainly want to list what things we wanted to add to our budget. We've already added quite a few things that are hit 2024's budget, like the security is $100,000 we'll be spending and so forth. That's already been built into what I'm doing. But the reality is that there were some things that we didn't get done, like the planting and so forth, like John is trying to get to, and so is SMAC. What type of items do you think you would like to include in the budget calculation? This year, we put a bunch of things in the budget that weren't in the budget calculation. We moved things around to make that happen, like the gym equipment and so forth. So last year, we only anticipated leasing gym equipment and the purchasing. We didn't anticipate doing the flooring. We did that. We didn't anticipate placing furniture at the pool, but we did that. So I'd rather have all those things, the wish list of things in our budget. Really would. I think that's what John's saying as well, right?
Right, I just, I'm not really comfortable with what we got in the books already. I don't know what your anticipation is we're going to need for the next few months, to give us to 12 months. And then that gives us sort of a footprint to go forward when we look at it, but we can come up with something. The actual this year is really important.
Of course,
And the actual at the end of the year
it's going to be even more
last year
important.
is also important. So using a column that shows to, what's the current date we have now? July. And I think last year we actually started doing the books somewhere around September. Right?
August, the end of August.
Yeah. So we could pretty much have pieces two ends to put together.
Yeah, and that's what the spreadsheet represents, John. That's the problem, is I'm trying to show that information to you. I've got, you can kind of see it at a glance. The yellow section is my projections for the end of the year. The rest of it is actual. So I've got budgeted and proposed and actuals on there, so we can give an idea. I've built in things that we've approved spending this month. Things that I know we're going to need to spend before the end of the year. I've actually color coded that so I could tell which are which. We're going to be spending, $2,500 we approved for an event, and $1,150 for an event, and we have $1,000 we just did for the laptop, and all that's been built into here, plus our regular expenses. And if anything was variable expense like electricity, I averaged it through the first 8 months. So at that point, I have a forecasted total for the end of the year, which is exactly what we did last year, the year before. So that forecasted total gives us an idea how much money we should have left, or how much deficit we would have if that were the case. Last year we hit the deficit mark, if you remember. So this year it looks like we're going to have a surplus. So to build the budget from that, I have to decide what happens to the surplus at some point, whether we roll it into the new budget, which is the most common thing to do, or put some of it in reserve, which might not be a bad idea as well. But the reality is that alters what we can spend for the year, or how much leeway we have for extra expenses, or decreasing or increasing the dues. So I can tell you right now, the bottom line on this, sorry, that should have been turned off. Right now, we didn't anticipate being anywhere close to the $100,000 mark in exempt income, but we're actually at $134,347 with projections only being under everything we've already done. So that's a huge windfall, considering that that's more than 10% of our budget.
How do we make $134,000?
I kind of just explained that, but
Well, I mean specifically, what dollar amounts came from what?
okay. We had processing fees that we did for the year were $19,000 and $19,714.29. Lease agreements were $3,600. Gate and access fees were $25,8514. Transfer fees, sorry,
I'm sorry.
gate and access fees is for the FOBs. $4,200 for transfer fees when we changed from one account to another.
How do we make money on FOBs?
We have an expense for it, but we actually charge a $10 fee, and the fob costs us 98 cents.
For anybody that's not on the warrant TD, they have to pay additional for the box.
I'm sorry, anybody that's not right.
On the warrant TD, the original.
Oh, okay, so if you're a renter or something like that.
Right,
Okay,
or if you
yeah.
have.
Or if your
children.
kids, you
The
add,
Bob's cost 99 cents, but we also have a labor charge that,
Exactly.
that covers part of that
Sure.
expense.
Sure, but the labor charge is already built into the labor for the year anyway, so.
Right.
It's just a fact, but the basically, that's. I would thought we would have gone through $4,200, that's 425, so but that's.
So that's a wash though, right? You spent 42, and who's talking about 42? So-
No, we spent about $300.
Okay. So where's the rest of the hundred and some odd $1,000? So far, I've accumulated in my mind somewhere around $50,000.
I wanna say the,
Well, the totals I just gave to you were 22, 30, 13, and 8, so that's more than half of it. There's also was a $47,000 carryover from last year because of the special assessment.
that's what we use the security money,
So
Well, that's not
that's
part of this number, that's in addition to this number.
really.
So how are you presenting that in the book, in the actual, well, I'm not even sure what I'm looking at here. Is this your proposed budget?
This is the projections for the end of the year at the moment.
Okay. So in our budget, we wouldn't include that.
No, but we have to, when we have a carryover, we have to include it in our budget. If we decide to put the cash into the new budget, we have to include that.
So the carryover, we've already agreed to. Generally, if there's a surplus, we're gonna carry it over. We've already built it into the voting on it in the annual meeting, right?
Right, but that's up to 10%.
We did that up to 10%.
You can only do it up to 10% without taxes. I mean, you can do it for as much money as you want, but you have to be taxed on it.
But we're gonna pay taxes on some of the stuff anyway, right?
Yes,
So we also have built, this year, we built $100,000 contingency, right?
exactly.
Which is what we've tapped to buy the gym equipment and do some of the things. correct?
No, we took $77,500 from reserves for that.
Yes, that's right.
I thought we were gonna use some of the contingency money and the.
We used the
The
balance.
balance that we needed.
For the contingency.
$120,000.
Right, so we took some money from contingency and reserves
Mhm.
to do it. And then eventually be paid back theoretically once
Yeah,
you
we have,
pay off the reserves.
we had $52,000 left in the contingency budget.
Right. My point I'm trying to say is we've had to use the contingency, which is what the contingency is for, not just the hurricane season. But admittedly, that's also one of the reasons that.
Yeah.
So my point is, if we're carrying 100,000 or 100,000 plus over, why don't we just plan on using that for the contingency? And then you don't have to, then you would reduce the assessments for this year because you have to carry over contingency.
Exactly, but you still, when it comes to the IRS test, you have to test 90% of your income. For its design purpose, tests out to be for its design purpose. Anything left over is considered taxable. That's all.
I got it.
Okay.
Some of the
Yeah,
carry over,
well,
can't. So you pay, it's called taxes, you pay
I'm
taxes.
super kind of on the other post here, Sean, and I think this is being briefed the way you're the treasurer, this is your meeting, so. I'd like to hear what you have to say all the way through. Could you share your document with me so I can pull it up for me and him to look at, and then you guys have added.
Sure, absolutely. Let me,
And then you can run through the whole sheet and brief us on what you found,
sure.
and then we can circle back to things.
Hold on a second. Oh, something that might be interesting to make it on the screen.
Harry Potter thing.
No, it's,
No, this thing here, the sheet, not.
oh, I have no idea. Is it,
who would you,
snitch?
I don't know, I just buy them.
kind of, like, looks like it, similar.
I've never had
Actually,
Harry Potter.
it's a Harley Davidson thing that you throw at cars.
No, that's Swedish fish. So whenever are we recording this? Never mind. Just shoot us, I would tell you. Is
Okay,
anybody else?
let me get the email to you. I gotta switch network again real quick. and we'll be in good shape. There we are. Back to admin.
They're just a moment. Doesn't like, no, I want to know that.
Why is that? Because I'm.
So it was Hurricane Brooks and,
I know, you know, when you log
We
on,
didn't get
I
enough
just,
to work out.
it does say,
Yeah,
but then I used to like it, but then I'm like, then it
My
started.
shoulders felt that
Yeah,
hurt, so they
you know,
after we flipped them all back
Stop.
over.
But when it comes up, I
Here's
just
our
look at
light.
it, it's like, yeah. I took on it, go to the, tell me about it.
remember the broken one that
Look
we
at
had
this
to
guy.
bust?
Yes.
It
Over
was in the box and
the 40.
one of them.
Yeah, I spoke to her. She said she sent it around.
And they did, and both stories together, how long is it together ever?
We can fix it all. We gotta-
I don't know.
Put it on there and then put it along with it.
I used to have a good memory. So I looked at the memory.
That's great service. Yeah, that's.
First station and stuff, satellite communications.
How we doing, Sean?
It's coming to you right now. Most likely when you get it with your format, the columns are gonna get all slid together. You have to widen them. You can just grab them all together and widen them through that.
That's not a real version. She's like, I was on the salad and you. The lunch is salad, you know, just. Not too big. So you don't take this. Just like, put it, you kind of, if you're not, I don't know, this- I don't know this. When I was.
Lovely.
Did you try to cast it? I mean, if you- maybe your laptop will work.
See that option.
It's the security stuff on this new operating system is what's causing the problem.
I don't see that option on here anymore.
You have to open up, Google Chrome.
Yeah, I don't have.
Okay,
I have
well,
Firefox and Santa.
no worries.
All right.
So basically, this is just every GL in order with what was actually expended, actual expenses through the end of July. So the section that says August budgeted, September budgeted, October budgeted, November, December, et cetera, are the forecast numbers. Some of which are fixed. Obviously, the income is supposed to be fixed because we're supposed to take in 100% of it, but it's fixed. And then that's actually based on the average of collections and so forth. So the stuff in yellow that you see in there is my projections. Anything you see in green are items that we have contracted for but have not paid for yet, but we're obligated to at this point. That'll be down towards the middle of the page on kind of line 197 or something like that. What is it? Yeah.
This is just liability. You signed a contract.
They're liabilities as soon as you put them in the system with the invoice, but yeah. But they are liabilities. Assuming that the numbers are exactly what they say they're gonna be, because when we approve something for $52,000, they come in at 49.7 or something like that, it's different.
This is just. It's not what expensive, right?
Yes,
So multiple sheets for this?
no, just that one sheet. It's just the master. It's a big sheet, but it's one sheet.
All we have is revenue.
No, really? No?
That's something that you can expense then.
Right here. Mention again.
He's sending it again.
Okay.
Yeah, just go and close it. Oh, looks like the header got cut off, so now the problem here comes. No, March. Okay, try that. I'm staring at the same, I open up the worksheet that I attached, shows everything.
So do you know how long? If you want the headings.
By the way, did we send out an announcement for this?
It was on the calendar, it was on Facebook and it was on. the website.
I said, people that I talked to didn't see it.
And there was.
It's not a Zoom link.
And I got the Zoom link for you. Took us a while to get it, but listen to it.
Well.
Right.
I typically split the screen to keep the headers on the one side and slide it back and forth. That's what I typically do. When it's long like this. The important part is at the bottom. Bottom corner. Line 235
Yes.
on column O.
But she, some of them.
And there's three things that contributed to that number. And it makes sense now, so. The overage at the bottom of that corner is showing you the combine what's left over from, obviously, from the contingency. The money we didn't spend for the security, the overages we got in the exams, and plus some savings that we've had along the way, which is quite helpful. So we actually are in a really good position financially for carryover this year.
Without being taxed on it.
No, we're gonna be taxed on it. 90% would be, you could carry over without penalty, $104,000 or something like that.
And then 138. Not 34. For a small,
All of that did last year was,
1.9,
right, so 10% of that.
but then we have about 38,000. To be falling up under. To not pay interest on, pay taxes on,
I'm sorry,
because we have 134,000 at the end of the year projected. Overage.
we have more than that projected.
Oh, I thought that's the number you said.
Oh, no, that was just from stuff that came in from non-exempt income. That's already taxable 30%.
Hmm.
We have made money this year, first time.
So.
I know, and I agree with you, that's, and I'm glad we have, I'm thrilled, John.
So $60,000, nobody wants to increase the dues for next year, right?
Not if we can help it.
You wouldn't have to this way.
Right.
We won't have to raise the dues.
I don't
I'm
believe,
recommending, be honest with you, I'm recommending rolling some of it back into the reserve, the 77.5 that we got in the first place. I mean, you still won't increase. That's what I'm seeing so far.
So, I still don't know how we spent our money last year.
Well,
I know the
that's-
big items that are in there, but I don't really understand. Maybe I'm the only one, so I apologize if I'm wasting people's time.
no,
But when I looked at my year, and I sort of looked at what you sent me. And I just had questions about, what do we spend for stuff? When we talk about bank services, what are we looking at as opposed to bank fees? What are we looking at? If we're looking at, as we go down, we've got 150,000 columns wherever it rows here. Breaking everything down to $5,000 or less, it looked like. So what are we actually looking at total as of how we're actually?
I opted to send you the details as opposed to summary. The summary would probably be easier to swallow.
Well, part of it is you've lived with it,
Yeah.
okay, and for me, you've got to bring me up to date. Cause as we're doing right here, and I trust your skills and your knowledge and all that sort of stuff. But I'm a board member, and the board, the group looks at me as one of the 7 people that are going to look at this and approve it. So if somebody asked me tomorrow, what did we spend in this category, because it was $21,000 in a number. I don't have your knowledge.
Of
I
course.
certainly don't have your detailed
No, I
knowledge,
would
but I
expect
can't tell them. So if I can't tell them, then it looks like I don't really understand our financials. And so it's not like I want to go down to the nitty gritty to the last $5.26.
Sure, of course.
It's just that I just generally need to know how we're operating, why do we have all these accounts? Many of them seem like they're duplicates for various categories that we're in, and that's understandable. But what really doesn't, you summarized when you were talking about the major expenses for the year, which we all pretty much know.
Right.
But they're really only a piece of what's gone into this, and there's other stuff, like you said, the routine things. What are the routine things? What are we generally paying for? What are we paying to our bank, for example, for this? One of the big issues we talked about was whether or not we could afford to set it up so we could have a Dropbox to have all the deposits go to them and have them put it in the bank and tell us what we received. One of the things I really feel strongly about personally, especially if we have a surplus, so we can begin to pull this in, is I think we need to eliminate the barriers to people making their payments. So if we say, well, if you give us a check, it's going to cost $16, we're going to charge you $16 for that. But if you mail it, when they mail it to somebody else, they don't get charged a processing fee, but our homeowner association charges a processing fee. And they do understand in some cases where you have a credit card, their credit card charges them for that.
Right.
But can we possibly take the part that we get billed for that, which is our processing on the back end, so that we don't have to say, in addition to that, you have to pay for this. The reality is that everybody pays for it.
Sure.
No matter what goes in and what comes out, it's all 100% either way. But if we can look at things that we're setting up to say that we're going to get all the things on our side out of the way. So we're going to assume that, and you just pay and we give you credit for it. And then, we can't be
Well, currently, John, when that specific subject is, the homeowner's not paying anything unless they use a credit card. At the moment. If they send a check in, they don't charge them the fee. If they pay it through Appfolio, they don't get charged. Currently, there's no direct pass through to the end member at this. Our bank fees are $4 a month for check imaging. That's all true. We don't pay any other bank fees. We do have a service fee for FHRW and a service fee for QuickBooks and QuickBooks payroll. We pay those. Those are broken down separately. That's why they are separate, so you can see what FHRW costs us as opposed to QuickBooks. On the bottom of that printout you have there, it actually has some highlights of what those categories were defined for. But I changed a couple names on them for you when you asked last year, and we have one called software and services, and one that's called bank fees at this point. They're basically separated for that reason. The other things that are broken down a little bit more micro analyzes the irrigation and the landscaping, because we have repairs, we have contracted services, and we have improvements. Then we also have things that we plan on, like tree removal and so forth. So those are broken down pretty granularly because that's one of our biggest expenses. Everything else is fairly straightforward. I mean, I'm as far as like internet, phone, etc. They're called what they are. So they're not really difficult to follow there. I don't know about you're asking, the broad strokes. If you look at the categories on that sheet that I just gave you, as opposed to the lines in between, it gives you the broad strokes. This is what we're spending for administration. This is what we're spending for banking. This is what we're spending for landscaping and irrigation. In fact, there's a couple other categories. There's legal in there and a couple others, but there's about 10 main categories that we code to at this point. So realistically, and of course, payroll's falling in as well. So realistically, if you summarize that and just did those, it would be a lot easier to palette. There's no question about it. My thought when I gave the detailed report to the board members was that I thought they'd want to see the minutia to see if there were ways we could cut costs. This is what I was looking for. But I basically can understand how if you're not living with it, it can be confusing. What is it that I can answer for you at this point? I'd love to go over some of the objections that I have and see if we can massage those, but the reality is that I do think we need to discuss what you guys plan on doing this year for things to add to the budget. I mean, I know the planting is one of them, but I think at this point we could probably pull that off this year if you really wanted to.
Pickleball court. Just kidding.
Okay, I don't think we got it up to that, but we could
Where?
buy some rackets.
No, I'm looking at the numbers that were in our budget compared to what you were saying, what you proposed we were spending at the end of the year. And our expenses were just a little bit less.
In
And
most
our
cases.
income was just a little bit more.
Yeah.
So you got that delta there, which makes it look like we made a lot of money, but if we had to spend a little more money, we made a little less money, we would have been right on track. So if we had some random expense that happened that we had to pay for.
And we still could experience that before the end of the
Right,
year.
so.
Yeah.
10 months to go.
And we're still thinking about that, whatever we settle with Associa and whatever turns out with that, that's still part of that number at the bottom. I've not built in yet. To put it in a liability category so you could calculate it, but then it could be a windfall as well.
Right. We expected $1.04 million in expenses this year. And we spent $953,000
So far.
so far, so about 50 grand shy.
Exactly. And that's contributing to this number. Exactly right.
Yeah, which for a community of this size and a budget that was 50 grand is not that much. That's like one
But
thing.
rest
right?
assured, the last 3 budgets that I've been involved in, we were 50 grand short.
Right.
No, I'm saying we did great.
No,
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 I'm
it's
saying
true,
it's-
but
it's-
we've
it's great.
adjusted the fees,
Yeah.
the annual fee that we charge the residents to reflect the cost of running the community.
Absolutely.
So it's not
Yeah.
surprising that it came out close.
I think that just recalling back in the fiscal year, there's a lot of things we got to say last year, but there's a lot of things we said no to as well.
Yes.
And the things that we said no to were actually the most visible things to the community. Like landscaping and things like that. Now, albeit, but the things that we bought more important in the long run than some flowers and flowers. But still, you know what I'm trying to say. Appearance is a reality sometimes. And we live in a really nice neighborhood and it should look very nice.
Well, I
What
guess
else
what I'm
is-
advocating at this point is there's
Do you
room to do
remember,
some of
or
that.
do you recall, or does anybody else remember? Things that we said no to this year, we wanted to say yes to. I remember tree removal was a couple things we had to put off
We did put the tree removals off,
There was a couple that we put off for like a month. We had to delay it a month to the following month. I remember having a discussion.
but they were done.
What's that?
They're at the Sagewood budget.
Sagewood project, not this one, yeah,
Okay,
but they were done, I mean, we still did them.
I just like to.
No,
to
it's a
your
good
point,
question.
I wanna make
yeah.
sure that we got everything covered in the next
The
year.
things that I don't think we did, I mean, arguably is really just planting that I think that we overlooked somewhat. We were talking about doing some planting in this area and some planting by the pool, and we just didn't do those things. We did do almost every other thing that we planned to, and then some that we didn't. So I think we did fairly well. It's just that there seems to be some room to do some planting at this point. if That's what you want to do.
Well, we got a lot of open beds, so just.
Yep, Absolutely, I entirely agree with you. I think that's a good thought.
Which we can take care of now with this.
Yes.
Little extra benefit. I know Bill wants to complete the lighting project there.
Yeah, and I hasn't come up with numbers, but the lighting, the landscape lighting isn't completed. We built money in for that and he hasn't, he's got more supplies needed to finish that project. So that's something we can certainly take care of.
At a minimum, bringing this flood.
Yeah, and there was some equipment, $16,000 worth of equipment things that we had planned on. We just spent 1,000 of it, so I've got $15,000 in this projection already to spend on other things. Projector, a screen for movie night, some equipment for the office, just some more iPads.
And that's included so that the 134 was assuming we're gonna make those expenditures, or that's not planned and therefore. it's
No,
not-
that's assuming in this case. It's already, that's
It's already in there.
one of the
So
few things that I projected
The
this.
windfall is, those
think-
things are. the
In
equipment is
anticipation
in.
of next year, I think the insurance prices are gonna outpace inflation. I think we need to really account for that.
I did already for the budget. I put
For-
a 20% increase on it.
20%.
So I don't see next year's proposed. number.
Right, I haven't completed because I wanted to have this discussion first.
No, great, yeah, we're having a discussion. That's
I
fantastic.
got all the way down to the landscaping and thought, there's some numbers that we need to throw in here for projections for improvements.
Yeah. I also think in next year's budget, I'd like to see payroll adjustment to adjust for inflation.
Already built that in.
Great. We know utilities are gonna go up, and I know you mentioned.
Built that in as well.
Actually, people, it's can go either way, they're either, depending upon what they decide at some meeting, they could either go down 11%.
That's what I thought.
Up 12%.
Right, so I built the 12% number because I read the same article in to be safe, and it would be a windfall if they lower it for us, but that's already been built in as well.
Right.
Most of the things are pretty predictable. We try to get quotes from our regular contractors in advance to see what their increases would be. Ballinger came up with one, and it actually is a very small increase from what they were planning to give us. And then we haven't heard from Sunrise, which could be a big one. They went up about 12% last year. We have had increases in other areas, big ones. We've added, for the janitorial services went up substantially. The pool services went up substantially more than 100%.
Yeah, but then we also expand their requirements, right?
Right, but it still wasn't budgeted. It's
No, I understand, but yeah.
We're
It's
getting more
not
out of
just that
it.
it went up,
We're
it's
still
like
spending
that
more
we
money.
changed our requirements.
And I
And that's
I've built
legitimate.
those factors in already. The only thing I haven't built in is variables that projects variables that we haven't. put in.
I think that the budget committee did a great job last year in accounting for this year and. We're on track for next year. It's just, like you said, small adjustments for inflation and some rising prices. We're not gonna see the dramatic increases that we saw.
Should I do like I did last year, give you guys a guesstimate of what I think we should spend on the planning and so forth and put it in there and see if you think that's a good number? Because that's what I did last year. I put them in blue, if you remember, and you guys told me yes, no, and then we just kind of went with it.
I don't hate that idea. It's not a bad starting point.
Well, I gotta have a jumping off point. That's kind of what the
Yeah.
conversation's about.
So we're gonna do another one of these workshops, right?
Five.
Right, but I mean, for the master.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The master's obviously the most detailed. The other ones go pretty smoothly because they have a lot of, like, there's only about 15 line items on each of those, so this is just a big one. But I would say yes. I mean, what I can do is, if you want me to give a jumping off point, I'll give you a jumping off point by the weekend. And we can review it quickly at the beginning of the other meeting if you want, and then just go on from there. I'll get here an hour before to make sure the.
I know the normal thing is,
We're not gonna increase the assessments, that's the most important.
Sorry, I can hear you now.
It's just, we're not gonna increase assessments.
We're not gonna need to increase the assessment.
That's the most important part.
Right,
But
but
Now,
not-
there's an argument about that I'll throw out. Many people say it's a bad thing to do, and I can, from a neighborhood I was in that kept the assessments flat for almost 11 years. It's a double-edged sword. When you finally do raise it, if you don't raise it a little bit at a time, people get very upset. So doing a nominal raise, a $2, whatever, something like that, may not be a bad idea.
But then we have to explain why we have $134,000.
Right, if the surplus is too much and we roll it into the budget, then you end up with a reduction. There's no way around it. It's the only way you would get a reduction is because of the surplus.
We still have things
That need to be done.
that need to fix, right? The slats at the pool, there's some
Exactly.
still.
There's some money to be spent.
reserves,
busted up stuff
The
in
wooden,
gym,
the
right?
wooden playground needs to be replaced. at that point.
reserves also.
Like, soon.
Well, some of it is, yeah, that's definitely reserves and so.
No, but I meant.
Yeah.
You know,
But there's
funding,
not a lot.
increasing funding on the reserves is.
And I sent an email to Steve, the guy that did our reserve study. There were 2 items that I realized he had left off the reserve, which need to be added into it, which is the perimeter fence that goes along Boyett in Westlake. So it's a Westlake reserve item that's not on it. And the actual surround fence around the pool is not included in the pool price.
Or the need to increase it to 8 feet.
Well, that's a whole other thing. That's an option. Yeah.
Well, they want to make it difficult to jump in, that's what you need to do. Then we'll have to electrify it.
I think razor wire is cheaper, just so you guys know.
So what is our goal for today's meeting? We slapping the table on our budget, or are we just reviewing the numbers from that you projected out?
Well, we're not slapping the table on the budget. That happens in October, but the reality of this is it's not a voting meeting, it's a workshop. It's basically, I'm trying to get feedback to come up with a workable budget that should approve.
Gotcha. Okay.
Right, so I'm gonna go back to my earlier recommendation, is the windfall should either become our contingency. Or if we have to, we already program out things that were not done this year, like.
I wouldn't count it as a windfall. By the time we get to the end of this year, we're gonna spend it.
The goal to me is to come out as flat as possible. That's the best case scenario. A little bit of savings, a little bit of carryover is fine, but having a bunch of money left over causes nothing but problems in the budget. Now, reducing the dues $1 or $2, if we can get away with it, is a windfall for everybody too, but you have to decide whether that's a good PR ploy or not.
Well, it's a one-time windfall that you then say, well, we have to raise it, so then it becomes a yo-yo effect.
Right.
So I'm actually against it because I think
And so am I.
the budget that we built last year represents a fair estimate of what it costs to run this
Yeah.
organization. Now,
A
we,
little bit left over to solve a problem if we have to.
So what percentage increase you think? I mean, monthly dues?
No increase. No.
well, I think it's, I'm with Patty on that. I think if you have a large
Jump
rollover,
in, man, this is your area.
It's everybody's area.
No, I mean, I know you're getting that. I have an opinion about it. I think we should keep it flat.
You know, you can justify increasing or decreasing or flat.
Right.
Any one of them.
Right,
My personal opinion is that there are 2 points that you haven't covered. One is, we have a surplus this year. How do we justify increasing the dues when we have a surplus that we built in the budget?
Well, I keep saying that, we are not gonna have a surplus by the end of the year. We've had one hurricane, we had another one on the way, we have a pool that looks like crap. We have busted out stuff at the pool, we have broken stuff in the gym already.
We'll increase it 10%. That's normal.
Normal is a
10% for
I was
everybody
thinking
every year.
5%.
Just automatically increases it 10% and let it go.
We'll come out slack this year, I admit that. But we're not gonna have a roof to carry over to next year. We have a lot of broken things around this. Something, forget this. That's something. we won't have.
there's a few things I could point out that we haven't talked about too, but I mean, we still haven't finished although it's still in the budget here and still in my calculations, the smart cameras for the rest of the neighborhood, once we get the Wi-Fi system, that money needs to be spent as well, and it's not, we haven't spent it yet. So there are things to spend money on. The point, I guess the point I'm making is I think that we're going, even if we spend a bunch of projects this year and jump on it, I think we'll be okay no matter what. So if you leave the dues with a 10% increase, which I think is a realistic thing, that's why I said leaving it flat can be a bad thing.
10%, I think when you I'm not sure you want to, I mean, unless we have a budget that shows it's going to increase 10%.
That's why we
We
have
had
to
a
find.
very
what we wanna
large
spend it.
increase this past year to make it representative. So unless we have Tico raising things 12%. You know, I'm hesitant, you know, and I agree.
So you see, part of my concern is a philosophy of developing a budget. In every budget I've always developed, HOAs or whatever,
Right,
we start with the expenses.
yes,
We put in there what we think we want to spend and what we have to spend, so that when we get it all down there, we put everything down there with it's a reasonable expense.
we're absolutely on the same page.
So then what we do is they say, okay, out of this, divide it by the number.
Right, yeah.
There, and let's find out what it is. Now, the way we're going at it though, is that we've got a surplus,
Right.
apparently. We're starting on the revenue side and we're saying, well, let's build it up so we can substantiate that, and it shouldn't be done that way. I think.
No, John,
I think we should focus on. the
I
other
disagree. I don't
part
think we're doing
come
that.
back to.
I don't think we're looking at
actually
doing
doing that, but I do agree that that's not a good way to go. I think what we're trying to do is saying, hey, here's our expenses, what do we want to spend some of this money on? And then from that point, what do we want to plan to spend money on for 2024, so we can make the budget and divide it by the 1328? That's kind of what I'm after. I'd like to know both. If we've got some money and we can throw it back into the budget, it's fine. What you want to do with that surplus to start with, so I can decide on how we're going to divide up the rest of it, basically.
Question. The collections income, 22,000 from collections. Isn't that money that we were owed anyway? So is there a corresponding expense?
Elections? What general ledger number is it?
See what's-
In the income, you put 22K for total collection income. Yeah. So
Yeah,
is
that's,
that just an increase?
wouldn't that, you're right, wouldn't that, we would have had a liability.
Where are you seeing that though? You see that at the bottom of the sheet,
Line 35.
line 35, hang on a second. Because that's all income, that's not collection.
Late fees are income.
So that's not,
Dues
late
Yeah,
collected.
That's not
it's not,
dues.
we're not collecting from past dues, that's collecting of the non-sufficient fees, the late fees and the assessment interest, that's collections.
got it, thanks.
Yeah, it's the fees that you get associated with those.
Yeah, the AR, the receivable is been taken out of the income on the actuals. So basically what we haven't received on those months were part of these calculations, but we literally have $19,000 outstanding at the moment for all areas combined,
That's good.
and 4,000 of it's one homeowner.
That's good.
We've done an amazing job getting that number down. I mean, it's been a group effort, but it's an amazing job. Melissa's help, the girls, myself, and anyone that got involved, and it's been something we've done really well. That's actually attributed to we started with a $40,000 deficit. Just to the master. That's attributed to why we have some extra money. We collected from the past, basically, too. It's awesome. I mean, go team. I'm just trying to find what we want to do with the money at this point, so.
What are the proposals for what needs to be done, incentivized? And then we'll figure out how much is there. And if we have a way to spend additional fees before the end of the year. As long as you sign the contract, we're not actually spending money. We sign the
Since we're
contract.
accrual, as soon as I put the contract in the system, it's part of this year.
So if they do the work January of next year, but we sign the contract this year, it's taken off the bottom.
It's gonna come out of this year's money.
So this way we'll get any.
I say get the planting done that we planned on doing and we didn't get done. That's what I say.
Absolutely. The other thing that's the liability, if it's a reserve liability, is this deck out here.
Yeah.
It
that's
was
a whole
built,
nother
it was
problem.
built incorrectly. So
That's-
there's gonna be a big to-do. I mean, our previous maintenance guy, Band-Aided it and did a pretty good job of doing that, but it's a Band-Aid. You can see it was not built correctly, just like the forts were not built correctly because they just built them on dirt. They did the same thing here. So, I mean, that's where I think we also go back to the reserves and say, like you said, the fence was not put in. And so that's the kind of thing that we go back and look and say, okay, that's reasonable to say, we had a windfall of late fees and things. That helps us build the reserves for refinishing the pool. That needs to be refinished within probably what,
This year, 2024, it's 100.
this year it's in there?
Yeah,
Right.
102,000.
That's in the end.
But it's gonna need to be done 10 years down the road too, right?
Mhm.
Yes.
Again,
Yes.
you know, and roofs are not going to last as long as we did and. You know, we're gonna have to put, 10 roofs up to all over the place. So
So some of these, reserve estimates in here are, somewhat a little off, I feel, because the playground wooden play structure just has 7 years life left on it. And I don't think it does.
No, it's rotting on the inside now.
I mean, it doesn't, so that's something that's gonna get.
again, but that's where we have a one-time windfall that says, okay, we can catch up. And have a more reasonable, or either fix it now and then continue with that.
Right, but the good thing, the sad thing is that we never funded that particular item before. It wasn't part of our reserve study.
Really?
And so, it doesn't reach. You're only gonna end up at $2,800. Let's see, nope, sorry, 8571 this year to spend on it, with 8571
Next year.
next year and the year after and the year after that, yeah, for 7 years.
The ones I was looking at, is probably between $50,000 and $60,000.
And that's what he's got in for $60,000. So, yeah.
Short question.
Yeah.
Got your spreadsheet.
That's fine. Did you make a
I
point?
see that there's no
Catch up.
numbers in the contingency line. Is that because you put those numbers in other lines for whatever we
It's
spent?
already been spent on, yeah.
But I guess you just made my argument that we have
What
things in the
percentage
reserves that are underfunded. So because we didn't fund them for 7
That's it.
years or 8 years.
Exactly.
So this is the catch up
Yeah, that's why I
to,
was looking to see what would be.
which was one of the arguments we made with why we had to make the adjustment on dues was. Reserves were
Well, that was the big
underfunded.
push.
Right.
And that was the big chunk. That was the big chunk that made the dues go up so drastically. It was pretty big.
Realistically, not drastically.
Well, to them, it was drastic. It was realistic to us. The decking is supposed to have got another 5 years.
What's the
Maybe.
percentage that we used on the contingency?
We're 42.
42.
Again, that could be something we pull forward.
Well, it'll have to be.
And,
If we don't
you know,
spend it, it'll have to be, yeah.
But again, that's kind of the point I'm making, is that what are some of the major reserve items that are there that we could pull forward or are underfunded? Then that makes a very legitimate use of the funds. Instead of looking to spend it, you invest it. Or, the place that's dying.
All it's investing, right? I mean, we're investing in the neighborhood, no matter which way you look at it, but I mean, those areas are definitely, they're both slated for 7 years, the good areas, and those things are not gonna last that long. So those are things to think about for this coming year, is what I'm saying.
Whatever we fix up next year is a splash pad.
Absolutely, that makes sense.
That, I don't think that is in the,
Reserve study,
Reserves.
it's a small amount, it's not a large amount.
not enough.
No, that's fine.
Let me see here.
And I
The
think,
pool,
well,
Yes, it is.
Yeah, it's a wrong design, shouldn't, gotta go for something that's not meant.
that's not, it's not gonna achieve.
Yep.
It's an eyesore. We got plastic daggers sticking out.
Yeah. It's actually, that becomes a liability, right?
So
Somebody
that
gets
gets
hurt.
torn out in place or whatever you do with it.
I don't want to carry out those, but we're finishing the pool this year,
Right, and
so we're gonna do it all at the same time. Okay.
But again, if we decide to do that with this year's money. Even if it's gonna happen in January, February, or March.
I don't think I want money in this year's money to do that.
It's gonna
Replace the
cost
splash
more-
pad,
it's gonna cost more than $150,000.
we're not gonna have 150,000 by the time we do it in the year. You're gonna have to fix things, we're gonna have to fix more trees that are gonna come down on buildings.
Mark, I need to stay with us just a little bit. If we spend,
I'm with us, everybody keeps saying we have $150,000. And we're not gonna have $150,000 by then.
we'll have $150,000 if we spend everything we've contracted for and everything that we have for monthly expenses.
Yeah.
Right at the gate.
Because we have 50,000 in contingency. Yes, if we have a major hurricane comes through and it totally destroys the building.
Yeah.
It's also why we have insurance, right? It's.
I'm not proposing 20% increase or anything of that nature.
So the reserve is $60,000 for the pool area water play structure.
I think we're all speaking the same language here. I don't think we're violently in agreement.
No, it's fine, I'm
I
just
think
saying,
we have some variance, because I have no problem with if we can justify it by pulling some money forward and keeping the fees flat this year. I have no problem with that.
we have funded $10,000 to the play structure area in the pool this year
So we have $10,000.
This year.
in the
So
reserve.
if you wanted, right, if you wanted to replace it before next, again, here's what I'm thinking, planning ahead. So that, we have it say, hey, we're gonna take it down in January, February, March. To replace it with another structure, so when school gets out in May. There'll be a brand new play structure there, people will be happy. Sure. Right, I mean, that's my thought process, that, even part of this deck, get a deck guy to come out or gal to come out and say. Okay, can you do it in bite-sized chunks, because it's a mess, okay. This area I would recommend first, and if we have extra this year, that can go, that's what I'm trying to say, that kind of. I'm not saying don't do the plantings, that's very nice, it's good, I walked up today and I said, there's a lot of dirt here, we should do something with that, I agree. But that's probably in our budget somewhere along the lines. And if we get through the hurricane season, then we have, that's fallout money on the contingency. And the contingency might be used for. The play set of the pool set, or the play set out here. And then you just keep now restarting the reserve, that's my position going in, and I'm only one of 7 votes or 6 votes or whatever we have.
Yeah, so, I mean, there's definitely ways to spend it, but for things that are larger projects like the playground pool. That's something I'd like to put in the budget for 2024 and plan on it, just plan on it.
I want to get it done before
Expert,
summer.
But just a quick Google for a splash pad, average prices from 65K to 500K.
Excuse me?
Obviously, we're not gonna buy a 500K splash pad, but. That's for a commercial, residentials are 15 to 35.
This one,
$500,000 for a splash pad?
I mean, we're not gonna
It's
get
like
500,000.
It's almost like a splash park.
Yeah.
let's,
I'm
65
talking-
on the low
I'm
end.
like, you make it like the old monkey bars, make them out of plastic with some water running on.
so I looked it up, it seemed to be pretty reasonable to me, but.
No, a good one is gonna cost some money, I get it, but
Okay, well, that's,
I have no problem putting it in the
Next year
budget
budget.
next year, but I also have no problem with saying. As we get to the end of the year, we have more fidelity on the money, on the funds. That might be something we do with the idea it's gonna take time to get it done. And so therefore it's done before the next season. So the construction is not happening while the kids are out of school, it's all done before the kids are in school, even spring break. People would be happy, I think. Now, if we could move it to the other side of
be
the
happy with
pool to make it less
$500,000,
noisy in
that's
my
what
house.
they
All right,
I'm happy to figure out how to do anything if we can. But yeah, we're funded 10,000, it's valued at 60, it has a 6-year life left, according to.
So that one there is valued at 60K.
yes, with a 6-year life and it's dead. I agree with you, it should just go
I
away.
agree, it's dead too. I think that the life is done, and we could have told them when we can have them adjust it slightly if you want to say, we've done it this year. It's
Before we slap the table on the master budget, do we want to get some quotes on splash pads? So we can.
Well, that's what I'm asking at this point. We need
Yes.
numbers to make this budget work.
Yes. Yeah, I think we should probably get some.
Splash pad, the
Even at
planting,
close of the
everything
year.
that we're planning on
Even at the
doing,
end of the year.
try to pull off the new numbers on it.
I'm sorry, you both talking.
Oh,
I'm
sorry.
sorry. It's also the end of year, not just 2024. It's if we have this funding. What do we do with it? And pulling projects for 2024 into this year. And it keeps, and then if we go back and we're flat and we don't have windfalls, we don't have a lot of collections, then we're running, as you pointed out earlier, then our budget is probably pretty realistic. And if we have to increase it for a certain amount, then it becomes based on, it's John's point, right? It's expenses. And we have the, whatever the number is, let's just say $1.04 million in that. So a reasonable expectation of what we need to do. That's what came up this year. And now there's a Tico's 10%, then we incorporate that in. It might be a slight increase, but if we don't have to do it, I'm happy.
Yeah, me too.
And again, I'm not talking for me. I don't write the check, so I lose track of it.
$68.
I'm thinking about the community.
I'm right there with John. I need the expenses to get a better assessment of where I can tell you how we're gonna spend, divide the money up. The reason for the conversation is, do we want to try to spend some of the money we have in surplus or roll it into the budget that changes the dues, which typically would reduce them, which I'm trying to avoid. And I think that's where the conversation was going.
Right.
Does it make more sense now? So
Yeah.
I said it poorly last time.
Right, and because we have these large, unfunded or unreasonably planned for reserves. Right, we have 2 or 3 things we just talked about, 3 things.
Major
that are-
things, yeah.
3 major things that are underfunded and to a degree, a little bit unexpected, not the place that has been dying for several years. We've already paid for repairs a couple of times, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. I
The
think
splash pad. So
the
that's
splash pad, the playground and
the water place.
even getting a quote of a deck would probably not be a bad idea at this point. See what we can get in.
No plastic.
Good plastic or composite.
Yeah. It metal, nobody, put metal on roofs, you don't put metal in pools. By the way, did you notice that was one of the things DeSantis, the expert said, elevation and steel roofs. 2 most important things, and block water.
Yeah. That's living code.
Yeah.
All right, do we chew this up enough?
Yes.
I think so.
I will give you a revised with my guesstimates, but I want as much feedback as I can get from real numbers. If you can get them from a Patty, that'd be great. I have a pretty good idea. I'm pretty close when I guess, as you know, so it'll get us there.
Can I get a copy of what you said?
Yeah, I'll send it to you right now.
Would you send it to me?
Sure. It's not done, but yes.
No, it's a starting point. It's a work in progress. Yeah, it's always been a screen.
Yeah, motion to adjourn.
No, there's no voting. It's just.
I'll let you know.
Mending.